Hey guys, this is Seth Smith, and I've got to say, I'm actually really optimistic about the end of the world. Again, I'm Seth Smith. This is my podcast. It's called Forward, simply Forward. And you'll find out why in this episode. There's a lot of doom and gloom going around in the world right now, right? 2020 has been one of the craziest years that any screenwriter could ever come up with, and I think we're all still subconsciously wondering where the murder hornets are. I thought they were going to be a great villain for the show, but I guess they're saving that for later. Maybe during the election, I don't know. But regardless, everything else that's happened this year has been pretty crazy. And I think a lot of people are feeling quite discouraged, and some people are even suggesting, right, subliminally, sometimes humorously, sometimes not so humorously, that this may in fact be the beginning of the end, right? I don't believe that. I don't subscribe to that. I don't take that as gospel, right? If anything, I see it as the beginning of something else, of something better. My major is English, right? And you know, when you're an English major, you study books so much that you actually become sick of books and sick of reading. But you learn in the structure of a story something called the hero's journey, right? It was popularized by Joseph Campbell, this idea of a hero's journey, and that the hero will go from his home and go out into an adventure and meet all these friends and allies and enemies and have all of these encounters. And then there comes a point in the story where they're in what's called the abyss, right? It's the darkest point that the hero gets to. And somewhere in that abyss is where they have, what you can describe as basically God intervenes, right? There's a moment of enlightenment. The hero, he or she, they realize something about themselves. They find an inner strength within themselves, and this is a very common thing. It happens over and over and over and over again in stories. I mean, if you were to compare that model to pretty much any story, movie, book, you'd see it over and over again, where the hero goes into the abyss, the darkest part of their journey, and it's somewhere in that darkest part that they actually they find the greatest treasure. And Joseph Campbell himself also said that I'm paraphrasing, but inside the cave you fear to enter is the treasure you seek. There's something about being basically pushed down to the lowest you can possibly go that is valuable and needed, and actually it creates a better version of yourself. And so that's something that I incorporate when I write. I write fiction, and so you see that, and the character has to go through that experience. It's a little bit harder when you have to apply that to yourself or to a country or to the world at large, right? When you're seeing people go through some really intense struggles in real life. That's a different thing, but I think it's just as meaningful to apply that, right? Your life becomes better, I would argue, that when you start seeing yourself as the hero of your own story. And that you are on a journey, and that you are encountering obstacles that are meant to challenge you, not break you. right? There's a difference, like there's a difference when you start thinking about that. And it was the Stoic Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor. He had said this quote, so I wrote it down: "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." So I'm going to repeat that again. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. It's this really weird paradox, but the very things that we face, the challenges and obstacles that we face, are actually the things that propel us forward, right? There cannot be any progression in our lives, or toward a goal, or into anything, right, unless there is an oppositional force. And that's a weird paradox, but it's true, and it's true, physically, like in the real world. I mean, there has to be oppositional forces, opposition in all things. But it's also true spiritually and on a metaphysical level. Like, you do not progress unless you are met with challenges. And there's something about that is, once you realize that, it's actually quite liberating to really understand life is hard. And this is how it is supposed to be, right? And so we talk about, the end of the world, right? Doom and gloom. There's tremendous obstacles and challenges in front of us, and I'm optimistic about this end of the world, right? In some sense, we're in the middle of an abyss. We're inside of it, and we're facing challenges that we've never faced before, right? And in some sense, I mean, and again, you have to think of yourself as the hero in this story. You are being called to become something greater, right? Lloyd Alexander is one of my favorite authors. He's an American author. He said the quote, I think it's, "Child, do you not see? And for each of us there comes a time when we must be more than what we are." And that's true. I mean, that's not just true for you. That's true for me. This podcast is an example of that. I don't like doing these kinds of things. I actually prefer to be in the background. I actually prefer to have something completely scripted out, just so I know I don't say one or two wrong words. Right? I'm something of a perfectionist in that regard, and something like this makes me very uncomfortable. But I get the feeling over and over again that this is something that I am meant to do in order for me to move forward. It's interesting because one of my favorite political leaders in the 20th century is Sir Winston Churchill. And Sir Winston Churchill was the leader of the United Kingdom during World War II. Now, a lot can be said about Winston Churchill. There was a lot of people who didn't like him for a lot of different reasons, right? He was not really the kind of person who was there to make friends. That's just Churchill. He was the bulldog, right? But I cannot emphasize this enough. Without Churchill and the kind of person he was, the multiple abysses that he faced in his own life prepared him for one of the darkest hours in history, when essentially the United Kingdom was the only country that was standing against the onslaught of Adolf Hitler. Right, Adolf Hitler and the Nazis had developed this really sophisticated way of taking over cities. I mean, they learned how to communicate through with the tanks and coordinate very effectively these strikes in order to sweep through Europe. It had shocked all of these European nations, and then one by one they just fell and capitulated to Hitler and made compromises and appeasements. And during the darkest moments of World War II, Winston Churchill refused to back down. In fact, it was more than just his refusal to back down to Hitler. It was this staunch, unyielding optimism for the future, right? He actually described it as this would be Britain's finest hour, right? I mean, to speak in those terms in the midst of war, I mean, it's incredible, that kind of optimism. And in a speech that he gave, previously, he says this. It's really profound phrase, and this is what I would want you to focus on. This isn't the end of the world. It is probably the end of what we knew, right? But we're moving forward into something that is better, because we're all being called to become something better. These obstacles that we're facing, they're the way forward, right? They're calling you, they're making you into something better. And so this quote by Winston Churchill is particularly profound in my view. He said, "What is the use of living if it be not to strive for noble causes and to make this muddled world a better place for those who will live in it after we are gone? I avow my faith that we are marching towards better days. Humanity will not be cast down. We are going on, swinging bravely forward along the grand high road, and already behind the distant mountains is the promise of the sun." Again, I think that is so profound. That is tremendous faith to have in the midst of overwhelming challenges. And here I am, right? Years later, I'm reading this and drawing inspiration from it. And I think that the challenges we're being called to endure right now are actually going to be some of our greatest sources of strength in the future. But that can only be true if we maintain faith and move forward. Anyway, I'm optimistic about the end of the world. I hope you are too. Hey, thanks so much for watching this episode of Forward. If you liked it, please give me a 5-star review and subscribe. Share this episode with your friends and family. Anyone. I'm not picky. You can share it with anybody. If you think they would like it, that would be great. And subscribe again, because many more episodes are on their way. This is how I move forward, and I hope it helps you move forward.